All right, welcome to the 100,000 subscribers celebration. I'm starting just a little bit early since I see a lot of people already in the chat having gotten ready for this. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the things that I wanted to, kind of go through. But let's have a little bit of a toast. I'm actually, it's going to be coffee for me because it's a little bit early in the day for me to be drinking alcohol. It's noon here, so even though it's a Sunday and Easter and a holiday and all that sort of stuff, I unfortunately have to get some work that I'm behind on done today, including writing portions of a paper that I'm going to be presenting before too long at the St. Anselm conference coming up later on in April. So when you procrastinate, then you get extra work. I might do a video sometime about how like past Greg screws over present Greg, screws over future Greg. So in any case, thanks to everybody who's here. Thanks to everybody who's part of that 100,000 subscribers. It's only taken 10 years to get to this point. And we'll talk about why that's the case in just a minute. But here's to all of you. You notice we've got new coffee mugs that are less spillable than the other ones that we have. But yeah, this is a great time. We passed up the 100,000 subscribers a while back, but it was like towards the end of the month last month, and I was really busy with stuff, and so I didn't want to try to pack it in. I thought I'd find a day that would work out. And I forgot that it was Easter Sunday, so there's probably some people who are, who would be here who are, busy with other things, with family or religious obligations or things like that. So what I thought I would talk about is, a little bit of the history of the channel and how I got into this, and some things that might be a little surprising for listeners and viewers. And then I wanted to talk about like some of my ideas about what I want to do for things coming up. A lot of which are like keep on trucking with the same stuff, but adding a few other things in or going back to some of the things that I did earlier. And I'm actually going to be running some polls in the YouTube channel about some of those particular video series that I got started, whether people want to see more of that or not. And then I thought I would just, take people's questions, comments, all of that sort of stuff. So I see some back and forth about, an Oxford Cambridge annual boat race. I know people saw that I posted a video about people practicing in the Milwaukee River. I'm not into boating. If when I do get into something that has rowing, it's a rowboat or it's a canoe. I don't do the team rowing stuff or even kayaking. I grew up in around lakes and stuff like that, but I'm much more pedestrian and old fashioned than that. So and I don't pay attention to what anybody else does with that sort of stuff. Some people are saying good evening. I'm imagining that a good number of the viewers are over in Europe. And yeah, people are saying the mug looks like it keeps heat in. Yeah, it's quite good for that. A lot of congratulations. Thanks for all of that. All right, so let me talk about the channel itself and a little bit about why it took 10 years to get to this point. Like most things in my career and life, it's not the product of an awful lot of concerted planning. It's more like, well, you do this thing, and then that opens up some possibilities, and people are like, yeah, you should do this over here. And sometimes I listen to them, and sometimes I only, implement what they're saying a couple of years later. And, my career has been that way. A lot of things in my life have been that way. And the YouTube channel has been that way. I started it out basically back in the old days of YouTube when individuals couldn't put out too much content as far as length went, YouTube had these restrictions. First, I think it was like 10 minutes, then it was 15 minutes, then it was 20 minutes. So as a private individual, you could only upload things like if they were a longer lecture that you had video recorded, you'd have to break it up into chunks. And so when you see those old videos where people are doing that, that's what was going on. And so I did that with some of my conference presentations. The critical thinking lectures that I think got me a lot of traction early on, they're actually not in my channel. They're in Fayetteville State University's channel, precisely because you couldn't upload long, 50-minute lectures. So I never actually got those back. They've been driving traffic to FSU, which I left in 2011 after that semester, ever since then. And the reason I started doing them in the first place was, well, there were a few things. So when I was at Fayetteville State University, they were really struggling, but they were investing a lot in faculty development. That's like teaching faculty to do new things. And one of the things that got my attention was the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, which is like the people who train, the faculty and how to do things better. They wanted to do this thing where they would come in and video record us giving a lecture. And they had a guy with a giant camera, and then they would give it to us as a DVD, which then we would use for tenure and promotion. And it was really interesting because I had somebody come into my classroom and I was cool with it. I realized afterwards that I'd misspelled a word enumerative on the board for that lecture, and it was there, the whole time. Glaring error, but I was okay with being on camera. And I noticed that a lot of my peers, they did not take to that as, quite as well. They get really nervous. And so I was like, okay, I guess I can do this. And then at the time, my fiance, Andy, now my wife, she suggested I should start doing what we call lecture capture, which is where you just video record your classroom. And so I started doing that. At first I was like, who's going to want to watch this stuff, but she was like, give it a try, and we went back and forth. She's always much more optimistic. I'm much more pessimistic about, trying new technology or putting things out there. And sure enough, a lot of people really like those critical thinking lectures. And then I started shooting other stuff. The chalk and talk lectures were quite early, some of my conference presentations, and it just kind of went from there. And then when I went to Marist College, I moved up to New York to be with Andy from North Carolina, where Fayetteville State was. And I started teaching as an adjunct at Marist. And I said, hey, can I video record my lectures? And they're like, yeah, no reason you shouldn't. Just get a release from the students because there's some privacy issues. And so I did that. And many of you have probably seen those early, introduction to philosophy and ethics, and eventually I taught, religion and American culture as another class there. And then, pretty quickly I was not just, teaching face to face, but also teaching online. And so then I started shooting lectures for the online classes as well as recycling these lectures. And that was like what I was doing in the early years, right? It was all kind of whatever happened in the classroom. I mean, sometimes you see like a student will bump the desk that the flip cam was on and it shakes all, or they're coughing and, that's not really optimal recording stuff. And then I started recording in classrooms without any students. And that was kind of an interesting thing to do. I realize a lot of people have trouble doing that. They need an audience. For me, I never really had that much difficulty talking to an empty room, not just because I, want to hear my own voice or something like that, but I would always just imagine the people who might be watching this and would get something out of it. And so in any case, I started recording other things, and usually they were pretty long. I also recorded some, more personal stuff back then. I talked about teaching in prison, or I'd answer a few student questions about love and infatuation, or I talked about struggling with depression, and in any case, all of that sort of stuff. We it got more and more people watching it, and they would ask me for things like, hey, can you do lectures on Hegel? Why don't you tell me more about this? And that audience, or subscriber, whatever you want to call it, and producer interaction has been pretty important. I gather that a lot of people don't read their YouTube comments or respond to them, so I was kind of an outlier in that as well, because I figured, well, why would you have comments if you're not going to read them? But I guess a lot of people don't, or they farm that out to somebody else. And the channel just kept growing and growing and growing. It's been growing at a steady rate. There's never been anything that was like a big, now I finally have traction moment. It's just been grinding away and producing stuff. And I've made a lot of different kinds of videos. At a certain point, I came to realize people have been saying, videos need to be shorter. These hour-long videos are too long. And I thought, okay, well, I don't want to do the bullshit 5-minute videos that people do where you can't really get into anything substantive. But I certainly could concentrate on one idea, and that's where we got the core concept videos from. And I've been using those in my classes, and it's a lot more flexible approach than just saying, hey, students, watch these 3 1-hour videos on Nietzsche's this or that. Instead, they can focus in on what it is that they want to study. And as it turned out, doing things that way aligned with YouTube's own weird algorithmic preferences, and so that got things boosted up. And so, over time, I started producing other things like the Sadler stories. I wanted to do a little bit more storytelling about my own life, or I'll do one-off videos about being here in Milwaukee, or YouTube Live was a cool thing that they added in that allowed me to, well, look at what we're doing right now, right? I mean, this is not something that we could do 10 years ago. And so I think that's kind of a nice feature that they rolled out. And, the channel's just been kind of steadily growing. I think a lot of people use the videos. Some people, I think, use it just for entertainment or to have something on in the background. Other people. So let me jump into one of the other things I wanted to talk about. The comments. Early on, I got a number of different consistent kinds of comments that told me that I should keep doing this sort of thing. One of them was, thank you, my professor won't explain anything about Aristotle or critical thinking, or pick whatever you want. And, at first I was like, really? And then I thought about some of my peers who are kind of jerks in academia, and I was like, well, I guess that must be the case. And then there were so many of those comments that I was like, oh man, this sucks for students. If you're teaching a class, this is a little bit of one of my rants, and I actually do have a whole video about this sort of thing. If you're teaching a class like Intro to Philosophy, your goal shouldn't be to talk about how wonderful Descartes is, but then never explain anything to anybody when they have, quite reasonably all sorts of questions about what the hell's going on in Descartes Meditations. You're there to explain it to them. And, I think a lot of professors don't want to do that work. And so my videos were doing that sort of work. It looks like we might have a visitor coming pretty soon. Sassy has gotten off the bed and is thinking about coming over here. Come here, girl. Oh, now she's getting down using her little ramp. Anyway, so that was one kind of response. And then, a whole other kind of response that I got was, I can't afford to go to school. I was in school, or I'd like to be in college, and your videos are giving me something like that experience of actually being in a classroom. So that's really cool. And I found that very gratifying, being able to give people that sort of thing. And then there were others who were like, I'm not getting what I want in other venues. This is very helpful, practically speaking. And so those are the things that kind of drove me. I mean, there's a lot of people who just say stuff like thanks, and I usually respond to them saying you're welcome. But the ones that probably, fed into my doing this stuff were the ones where people were saying this is meeting a need that's not being satisfied elsewhere. And it's not as if I'm like the only video channel that does philosophy, right? There's hundreds of them out there, maybe thousands, and some of them are way more high production, and they got animations and music and stuff like that. I always thought it's important. I'm not trying to compete with them, right? And they actually get a lot more views in part because their videos are shorter and easier to share. But I thought, we need videos explaining things in a competent, not really, you could say, ideological way. I mean, I don't agree with Nietzsche or Kant on a lot of stuff, but I'm going to present their stuff as if I do, because somebody ought to do that in a competent way. And so that's essentially what I've been doing. And it's very gratifying to hit this 100,000 subscribers mark. So, I think I'm going to actually look at some of the comments and address those, and then I'll talk about some of the things I want to do with the channel coming up as well. All right, so we talked about the rowing thing, and then there's Dustin way up there. He has sort of a SADLER thing going on. It's always nice when people get my name right. So many people, you can say Sandler or Statler or things like that. Dustin asks, when is Sadler getting his bronze statue? I don't know if you get a bronze statue. I know there's something you're supposed to get, and I looked at it, but it like the button, right? But it takes a while before they actually get it. Here's a good question from Sonny. What does it mean to you to get this far in your channel online work? So it is kind of a surprise to get this far in, but I'm also somebody who operates in large part on inertia, and I've got forward momentum going, right? Oh, there's a little Sassy. I'm going to pick her up for a second. People can see the 18-year-old girl. She's been up here, and she's, she sometimes wanders in when I'm trying to shoot a video, by the way, in the studio, and she'll like make noises or stuff like that. Yeah, she's looking a little reluctant today, isn't she? But she also wanted that attention. So, all right, let me put her back down. Evidently, she's not in a super cuddly mood. Yeah, it's gratifying to reach that level. I think it also opens up some other things for me, practically speaking, on YouTube, but I haven't had the time to go ahead and explore all that stuff yet. Let's see. Dustin says, crack your knuckles again. That sounded so nice. It's totally off topic. When I was a kid, I learned to do that, and people were like, oh, don't do that because then you're going to mess your joints up. And I was like, you're full of crap. The way I was about just about anything having to do with your body, you shouldn't smoke because, that's going to be hard for your lungs. And I discovered, when I was in my late 20s that was probably the case. Don't do hard martial arts because that's hard on your joints. Yep, you find that out. Don't listen to music too loud, either, when you're like playing bass in the basement or, with your stereo speakers cranked up or going to concerts or having, headphones on. Man, now I'm half deaf. So, you learn these things the hard way. All of my joints crack like crazy. And there's a character in, I don't know if any of you have read Mervyn Pike's Gormenghast trilogy. In the first one, there's this character who's introduced, and is it Flay or Frey? And all of his joints crack. And I thought it was so funny when I was in my 20s, that would be the case. Now I'm that guy. I walk around and it's cricky crack all the way. All right, Dustin has a practical question. Do your students have to grant permission because their voices would be in the videos? Was there ever a conflict with that? So that's an interesting thing. Yeah, the FERPA law requires that you get a release from students if you're going to use their their likeness in any way, and that would include their voices. But sometimes you'll actually see students cross in front of the camera as well. I never had a student who struggled with that, who wasn't cool with that. And so this is a little bit of a digression. Lecture capture is one of the best things that you can do as a professor for a variety of reasons. And actually, you want to do the lecture capture yourself, not have the school do it, because usually the school will screw it up in some way. And then it's their content, not your content. Students loved having the capacity to go back over the class sessions and review what we talked about, or if they missed a class session because they were sick or had some athletic event that they had to go to. I had a lot of student athletes. It was a real godsend to them, and it was very helpful. Interestingly, there's this worry that like recording lectures and then uploading them would lead to students not showing up to class. Totally not the case for my classes. Students wanted to be there, and they typically liked having that as an available resource for them. The early research on lecture capture found that when you look at all the different things that you can do as an instructor, in order to give students the impression, whether it's true or not, that you actually care about them, lecture capture was one of the highest ranked things that you could do. Isn't that bizarre? That and I thought about this for a long time. What's the reason for that? My only answers are basically two. Well, you're giving them a resource that they can use, right? That's helpful for them. And then there's something to do with like the human form, I think, that has that possibility of connection. You do have to be able to like be a speaker who can connect with your audience of students in order for this to work, right? If you're really dry and dull or you're condescending, then lecture capture can actually be counterproductive, because students will be like, wow, now I actually have on camera what a jerk that guy is, you know. But if you have an ethos of like caring about both your subject and your students, and you don't like take yourself too seriously, you're willing to joke around and stuff, it's really powerful as a means of education. So Ruffy Bumble says, congrats on reaching 100K. Thank you for making reviewing and lifelong learning free. Oh, you're very welcome. That's very, yeah, it is part of like lifelong learning. And as I've been teaching now since 1999. That's when I had my first, not TAing for somebody, but actually teaching my own class. So over 20 years. And I think over time, I've come to see, even in the academic setting, it's really important that we don't just try to like cram people's heads full of content, but that we help them to become lifelong learners. I mean, if I teach an ethics class and the curriculum basically ends at the end of the semester, it's not much use for people, is it? And so that kind of bleeds over into what I do with the YouTube videos. And I looked at the podcast stuff just the other day, the Sadler's Lectures podcast, as I was putting it into a page where people could access all the playlists easily. There's a lot of stuff there, and it just kind of goes to show you what you can actually generate if you just kind of keep your head down and you're not looking at the big picture, but you're consistently churning away at the material. And I could keep doing this, provided YouTube stays a stable platform for the next. I mean, I'm not going to live another 50 years, most likely. I'm 50 now, and I don't imagine I'm going to hit 100 unless medical technology drastically improves and I lose the weight and all that sort of stuff. But I could live to 80, and I could see shooting videos for the next 30 years, and continuing on doing this, because there's so much out there to do. So yeah. Will Camp says, any advice for an undergrad looking at graduate school doctorate programs of philosophy, pitfalls, advice for navigating academia, how to effectively manage debt? My career is hugely inspiring. So my career has been a lot of being lucky in some respects. I didn't have any good advice about graduate school myself, because where I went to undergrad, the professors were like totally checked out. There were only two of them. They were very old and had no idea how this stuff worked. One of them actually wrote me a semi-sabotaging letter of recommendation. I was lucky I had really good test scores. And so things have changed radically from then. The graduate program that I stumbled my way into at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale was really quite good at the time, although ranked very low in Leiter's philosophical gourmet bullshit. But it was really a great place, pluralistic department, amazing library compared to so many other research institutions, as I later found out. And the capacity to study the sort of things that I wanted to study, not only with philosophy but also with classics, English, speech communication, and it was a great place for me to be. But now they're down to 4 professors, and I don't think they're going to keep their program. So things really do change a lot over time. This is a very difficult time for applying for grad school. There's like forums that you can participate in out there, and I have some friends and clients who are in the process of being undergrads applying for grad school, and they're getting turned down by so many places, way more than would normally be the case. I think partly due to economic crisis, partly due to COVID, partly due to other factors as well. So it's quite tough. And I guess the best bit of advice I would say is don't take any of the rejections personally, because applications for graduate school, trying to get a job, publishing, those are all black boxes. You don't really know what other people. I mean, with publishing, you might get a little bit of, the reviewer one says this paper needs this, but generally you're throwing your application fee and all the documents that they wanted into a black hole, and they're doing whatever they're doing in there, and it may have zero to do with you. It may have everything to do with factors within the department. Even back in my day, I applied to 10 places. I got fellowships at 3 of the ones that I got accepted to, and I got accepted to almost every place I applied to. But I only applied to places that I thought made sense for me. And 2 of those places, 2 out of the 10, the whole process got derailed. Marquette lost my letters of recommendation, which when the chair found out, he was pissed about, but it was too late by then, and what did I know? I'm just a grad student, or an undergrad actually at that time. And nobody was like giving me any useful advice. DePaul had a falling out between their analytic and continental philosophers in that year, and the analytics said, "Screw you, we're out of here." And so DePaul sent me a letter saying, "Sorry, we don't have a graduate program for the time being. We'll think about it down the line." And so there's all these weird hiccups and crap like that. But the biggest thing is, like, don't take this stuff personally. It doesn't have anything to do with you as a person, and it has everything to do with the institution and what they're looking for. How to effectively manage debt, that's a whole other thing. I mean, is it worth taking on massive debt to go study philosophy at the graduate level? It could be, but it wouldn't be if your goal is just to be a professor. That's probably no longer a good trade-off. So if you are going to do the PhD, lots of resources out there, lots of discourses about what else you can do with the PhD besides just trying to be a philosophy professor. Sam G asked, do I ever dabble in Eastern philosophy, maybe a few core concepts? So I do more than dabble. I mean, I've been studying non-Western religions and philosophies which bleed over into each other since I was in high school. But I'm handicapped by the fact that, as opposed to most of the Western philosophy that I work on, I can read things in the original. So if I want to check on, say, Plato or somebody like that, I can always go right to the Greek. can't do that with Confucius, right? Or contemporary Neo-Confucianism, because although I've dabbled in learning, Chinese and basically, characters in the Mandarin, I never got very far, and so and classical Chinese is a whole different ballgame. I think it's better left to other people who are more expert in it. And actually, when I teach classes and incorporate, as I did, for this semester, Confucian tradition, Taoist tradition, I use other people's videos for that. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. Same thing goes for Indian philosophy. I don't read Sanskrit, I don't read Pali, I don't read any of the other more contemporary languages. So I'm kind of reluctant to shoot a lot of stuff because I'm not happy with my own competence when it comes to these things. That said, I don't know. Maybe down the line I will do some. I mean, I definitely need to shoot more for my own academic students, especially now that they have me teaching world religions in a regular sequence as well. That's a tough class, by the way, to teach. In part, so total digression here. In part because in a semester you're introducing so many like vast traditions and ways of thinking about things, and you're like introducing students to terminology coming from all these different linguistic backgrounds as well. So, all right, let me read down a little bit. Athy says, Jordan Peterson tells his students not to take notes in class because he thinks it deters attention. Do you tell your students to not or take notes? I leave it up to them. There isn't any like one recipe for how everybody ought to be doing things. If you're doing lecture capture, as he in fact did, that's why he got to be popular in the first place. It wasn't because of Maps of Meaning was such a great book. It's definitely not. He put his stuff online and people liked it. If you're doing lecture capture, you could say, hey, go back over it and then take notes then. But I mean, I don't prescribe for my students take notes or don't take notes. That's up to them to figure out, Let's read down a little bit. There's a lot of back and forth about taking notes here. Says, I learned the hard way not to get involved in the comment section. So this is kind of an interesting point, and some people may disagree with me on this, but I've always been pruning the comment section, right? If somebody's a jerk, I don't engage with jerks very long. So people who are, going to like argue in bad faith about something or just expound their own views, I often give them a few interactions and then I'm like, well, good luck with your studies. And if they want to keep going on after that, nowadays I actually offer them that piece that I wrote about don't give jerks time, and then I kick them off. And doing so on Twitter with blocking people, on Facebook on my page with doing the same thing, and on YouTube means that the majority of the interactions that I have are pretty good. And I look at my YouTube comments as basically that's my front porch. You're commenting on my video, you're engaging with me, and you get to talk with me about stuff. But if you act like a jerk, I'll kick you off my front porch just like I would in physical life. And I'm not saying that everybody should adopt that as an approach. I found that it's been very good for me, in part because it keeps the trollish behavior at a certain level. It never lets up, of course, but I don't have like tons and tons of trolls. I also, when people were trying to organize, especially after I did that video, the response to unwanted advice. The Redditors and 4chaners got all up in arms about it. And it was almost like a litmus test putting that out there because I got all these ideas about like, well, who shouldn't be here? And I put in some keywords that, would trigger, a review of comments, and it was great. It headed off, so people get mobbed on Twitter or YouTube or stuff like that. It headed off that sort of thing. So, yeah, comment sections can often be very toxic. Dustin says, I always watch Sadler at 3.7x playback speed. He sounds so different on normal speed. Well, if you can actually assimilate any ideas at that level, that's good for you. That would be very surprising. So I'm guessing that's probably a joke. Oh, yeah. Actually, Milan also says hackers utilize the comment section. I saw a scam the other day that one guy would post, and obviously it's like a bot account or fake account. I broke into my buddies, I broke into my girlfriend's Instagram account using this platform, and then somebody else would say a variety of different words like legend or awesome or something like that. Yeah, there's always like new scams happening. It's kind of funny. All right. Here's a good one from Jake. A fun idea that could also potentially continue growing your channel would be to react to PewDiePie's videos where he solely talks about philosophy. He has a number of them now. That's actually an interesting idea. I've never done a reaction video. I imagine it can't be that difficult to do in terms of the editing. Now it's funny because when I heard PewDiePie was like putting stuff out there, I was like, oh, come on, dude, stay in your lane. But maybe that might actually be kind of fun to do. So that's interesting. Arvid says, thank you for all these years of non-personal tutoring, Professor, not only for philosophy, my reading comprehension in English and German has gotten a lot better thanks to half-hour Hegel. Yeah, I guess that's one way to do it. Although Hegel is not a great writer, right? As a matter of fact, I mean, the English translations are pretty good, right? But you're only working with the material that you've got. Translating Hegel is not as fun as, say, translating Schopenhauer or Nietzsche, people who are much better stylists. So, yeah. But it could work that way, Sam says, I run a page with, 15 million followers, sun gazing on Facebook. I wish I could get your teachings to the Facebook humans. Any ideas? They need it bad. I mean, why not just post videos from the channel there, right? I think that's easy enough. Sun gazing, though, what's that about? So, all right, let's see what else we've got here. So, yeah, Jake says reacting to those videos would be fun. Well, here's a good one from Effie. I try to study philosophy on my own, but I struggle with procrastination and lack of motivation, to be honest. Yeah, we're fortunate in that with the internet before COVID and now even more after COVID, there are lots and lots of philosophical communities online. And so it could become a lot easier to find places to meet up with other people and like do a study program. If one good thing, one site I would actually recommend going to is Meetup. There are local philosophy things all over the world, and most of them went online due to the COVID pandemic. So like our Milwaukee Sophia, that's the Society of Philosophers in America, we get people coming from all over the place because we're on Zoom now. Same thing with the Milwaukee Stoic Fellowship. So that's one thing that you could check out. I mean, you can still procrastinate, obviously, if you're in a reading group, but it's a little bit easier if you're in there with other people, isn't it? And you get a little bit of support, provided the other people in the reading group aren't jerks or something like that. But if they are, just go to the next group. There's thousands of philosophy groups out there. So I think that would be a good thing to do. Oh, it just skipped a little bit. Let's see. Somebody had a question I was just looking at. Where did it go? All right, let's skip up a bit. This is really frustrating when I can't find the comment I was looking for. All right, I'm just going to pick up where I am. So I'm sorry if people are getting skipped over. Jod says, I'm a viewer from the Middle East, been watching for a while, never subscribed because I felt intimidated. Started my philosophy journey recently, and you've been helping a lot. Congrats, doctor. Yeah, I suppose, I would get this every once in a while. People would be like, why are you subscribing to this person? Why are you subscribing to this person? And, I just hit subscribe when somebody has something, whether I agree with it or not, that I think I might want to go back to down the line. Usually don't, because I don't have the time to watch other people's videos all that much. But I suppose if you're in a context where other people would be like surveilling that and think that checking out philosophy could be a bad thing, then, you kind of have to keep that under wraps, right? So that makes sense. Let's see here. Milhan asks about Thomas Aquinas. Can I do a series on him? I've done videos on Thomas Aquinas. I just haven't done as many as other people. Sam Thomas says, you can form a supergroup with any musicians past to present who's playing which instrument. So for me, of course, it would be metal, right? And I would have, there's no question about which person would be the singer. It'd be Ronnie James Dio, who unfortunately died a little bit over 10 years ago. And I would go with like a 5-piece with an occasional keyboardist playing as well. Keyboardist would be Don Airy. The bassist, probably Steve Harris. Although I'd also consider Bob Daisley for that. There'd be a lead guitar and a rhythm guitar. The rhythm guitar would be Rudy Schechner, because he is one of the best out there, and he's also a great composer. And it'd be interesting to see what he and Dio did together. And then on lead, that's tough. I mean, there's so many, incredibly talented guitarists out there. But I would probably go with. That is very tough. I mean, I might say Fast Eddie Clark, and then on drums, I'm not really that into the drumming, but I guess there's a lot of really good people out there. Maybe Cozy Powell or who else would be really solid on that? I mean, Clive Burr. But who knows what something like that would actually sound like? It's kind of an interesting idea. I'll put that question to my friend Scott Terulli, who I do the classic metal class with, and see what he has to say about that, because I think he probably would have a much better answer. All right. Let's see what else we got. Dustin says, Sadler, don't discuss how much longer you'll live. You're making me tear up. Well, I'm hoping to live for another 30 years or so. And if I go beyond that, that's gravy, that's still a long time, and it lets me accomplish a lot of the things that I want to do. But you have to be realistic about this sort of stuff. I mean, the one good bit of news is that apparently on my biological dad's side, people live a very long time. So it really depends on how many genes I got from him, and on the genes I got from my mom's somewhat messier gene pool, and how we live and all that sort of stuff. So, all right, here we go. The lifelong learning thing is huge for me. I never felt like I learned enough philosophy in undergrad. Always regretted it. Now, if I do read a text, I have a good commentary. That's a good way to to put it. And I actually learn quite a bit myself going back to these texts that I'm teaching and commenting on. There's something about having to get in front of other people, whether it's in the classroom or doing a public talk or doing it in terms of videos, that really makes you like rethink what you're engaging with. And so I think that's a really important point. There's Mark Smith, my friend and colleague. Congrats on 100K, a well-deserved milestone. Now for 200K. We'll see how long that takes. Random question. Have you ever thought of making a Wikipedia page for yourself? Yes, I have thought about it, and it seems like a lot of work, and I might be wrong about that, but I haven't done the work to actually research that. So if anybody does want to put together a Wikipedia page, about me, they should like reach out and I'd be happy to give them. The tricky thing is, doing the biography, because I think a lot of people don't know that much about my biography and past. They know like bits and pieces of it, and then it would be like, where's my work? Well, it's scattered all over the place, right? So a lot of people know me for this thing over here, but don't know me for this thing over here. But I'd be happy to work with anybody who actually wants to put together a Wikipedia page, so that it wouldn't, it'd be reflective of what I actually do. That would be kind of cool. But it's not something I want to do the work for myself. I'm kind of lazy that way. Let's see here. So here's a good point from Milahan. You don't need to go into debt in order to get a superior education in philosophy. Books are cheap and scholars are online. And there's two sides to that, I would say. One side is that, yeah, you can do a lot of the stuff on your own. It's not quite the same thing as like being in a grad school program. But that said, and here's the other side of it, there's a lot of grad school programs that people pay lots of money for, and they're not getting what they thought they were going to get by paying all that money for it. So, I'll use some examples, right? So Marquette University, and I'm pointing that way because it's 12 blocks from here to the west, and that's a place where I've taught and had an office and interacted with the grad students, and I've presented there, and have a lot of friends and colleagues there. They have a pretty good grad student culture there. That said, even if you get an assistantship, they don't give you full tuition remission, and Marquette costs high 40s, low 50s, thousands per year to go to, and they're not placing graduates like they used to back in the 1990s and early 2000s when they had a very high job placement rate, and so it's not necessarily a good trade-off for the money that you have to do. And if you go to other places, like I have friends who work at St. John's University in Queens, and they don't know each other, and they're professors. And I was like, how do you not know each other? And they're like, well, we only come in for these meetings every once in a while and to teach our classes, and then we get the hell out of there. And I was like, don't you have like office hours and like walk down the halls and meet each other? And they're like, nah, we don't do that. We just get out of here right away. And I was like, well, if the professors aren't actually engaging with each other, I doubt there's much of a grad student, interaction, which is important for learning, having peers that you work with. And, they probably charge as much as Marquette does. So I think that's, another issue as well. Colomos, any thoughts on an essay connecting early reading books like The Mouse and the Motorcycle in the development of moral decision making and the virtues? Not for me, but I think that's a really viable area of study. There are people who specialize in philosophy for children, and I think that's the way to smuggle in philosophy in the K through 12 education stuff. I think we really do need a lot more philosophy getting introduced in American education, that might be a really great way to do it. Writing some stuff about that, and then like doing videos about that, and then getting educators interested in that. All right. Let's see who else we got. A lot of various thanks stuff. You're welcome to everybody. Some stuff about Islamic philosophy. Same deal with that. I don't read Arabic or any of the other useful tools for that. Although, it's really, one of the good things about Marquette, they have the Aquinas and the Arabs project, where graduate students are actually researching this stuff. Let's see. There's a lot of stuff here about Islam and philosophy. Let's see here. Brandon asked about two different shows that I don't actually watch. Curious if you've seen Lost or have any thoughts. Among the characters are John Locke, David Hume, Rousseau, or if not, The Good Place. So I watched like the first 3 episodes of The Good Place, and then I was like, this ain't for me. I guess it got better, but it was kind of a turnoff. And this is, similar thing with mathematics. Writers typically, when they're trying to do philosophy, they do it badly, and they stick with the stuff that they remember from undergrad, like the trolley problem or things like that. And it's just not interesting enough for somebody who does it. It'd be sort of like watching a thing about heavy metal and all they do is talk about Metallica's Black Album, and you're like, well, okay, there's more to it than that. Never watched Lost. I guess they had characters named after famous philosophers, but I don't really know much about that. Let's see. Salam says, thankfully I could be part of your channel just before it hit 100K. Channel's a gem, and you're one of the most consistent channels I've seen. I think consistency is something that is often underrated. And apparently YouTube likes consistency in terms of recommendations, so that's quite good. Let's scroll down a bit more. Let's see. There's a lot of back and forth about Islamic philosophy here. Here's one from Ashton. What are the elements of Stoicism you don't accept? I'm reading through a new Stoicism right now. Well, that's a achievement right there. Actually, I have it right here because I was talking about it with the client. We're talking about Becker's A New Stoicism, which is one of those books that a lot of people buy and very few people actually make it through because it's a tough work. I've actually worked through the entire book except for the appendices with a client, and it took us 4 months of weekly meetings to do that. So you got your work cut out for you there. But it's a really great book, and it was very important in the Stoic revival. I mean, I don't. What don't I accept? I mean, I don't accept the Stoic cosmology. Although it's interesting when you look at it. It's not all consistent. Even like whether souls survive after death, Seneca has a few things. Now these are in Letters on Consolation, where he's like trying to provide some consolation, where a few good people get to go up by the stars and stuff like that. I don't really accept much of the Stoic argument about determinism and their form of compatibilism. When it comes to anger, I'm sort of more sort of a mix of Aristotelian and Stoic perspectives. I think the Stoics have some really useful things to say about it, but I don't buy their zero tolerance policy when it comes to it. I mean, that said, there's a lot of Stoic philosophy as somebody who does work on medieval philosophy, and particularly pre, like let's incorporate Aristotle, like Thomas Aquinas stuff, the stuff from like the 11th century backwards. There's a lot of Stoic stuff in there because a lot of Neoplatonism incorporated Stoic stuff as sort of like the bottom level. It wasn't just Aristotelianism; it was also with Platonism on top. It was Stoic stuff. The ideas about how the emotions work and the vices, that also made its way through Evagrius Ponticus into John Cassian's treatment of the capital vices. And so there's a lot of Stoic stuff that makes its way through into like early medieval thought, and I find that stuff pretty interesting as well. So Gutter Grown says, I'd run your Wikipedia page. I don't even know if that's how it works. Do people run pages? See, that's oh, here's a great one from Dammit Albert. How much of your Wikipedia article is just favorite metal bands? I think that actually should make its way in there because one of my side projects, as some of you may know, besides the classic metal class that Scott Cerulli and I do once a month, every third Saturday of the month. This month, by the way, we're doing German metal bands from the 1970s to the mid 80s. I also have a blog called Heavy Metal Philosopher, and so that would probably have to make it in there. Milhan says, "Can I do any symbolic logic videos?" I've thought about doing that. I would need to get my hands on some like contemporary textbooks. It's been a while since I taught logic, and I know they change the textbooks from time to time. But I can always just request them and pretend I'm going to teach a class on them and have places send them to me. It is something I could do. I'd have to free up more time. And I do plan this coming fall to be doing less academic teaching and more other things, including developing online courses in my Study with Sadler Academy. But it's tough to get in even the stuff that I get done right now. All right, let's scroll down and see a little bit more. A lot of okay. That's interesting. Milahan says so many philosophy majors only study Christian philosophers and never expand their skills. I think masters should expand to Islam, which is a new area to explore. Very few Christian philosophers are actually being studied in most academic philosophy departments. I mean, and if they are, it's not usually qua Christian philosophers. Descartes kind of pitches his project as Christian philosophy, and there is a God in there, but it's not the God of Christianity. It's a deistic God, quite frankly. So I would say that there are a few places that do that. And most of them will say like, well, Aquinas is our main topic, but they're really far in the minority. And I'm all for widening the canon and including a lot more people. The trick is you actually have to be competent in teaching them, So that's the issue a lot of the time. Mark asks something that I don't know if I'll ever do. When are you going to record a sick bass lick to use for video intros or even shred some banjo? Now, the banjo I play more often than I need to start practicing again. I also need to fix the action on it, and there I got to get my friend Scott to walk me through how to do that. And I don't even have the right Allen wrench, it turns out, for fixing it. When my daughter had it, she put the action real low, and I don't know why she did that because I get a lot of fret buzz, but I might be able to pick it up in the summer. But I'm so, compared to where I was as an undergraduate when I was playing bass every day, I'm so far away from that. I am thinking, though, about having Scott record. One of the things I'd like to do is actually do more stuff about metal, and I might actually do that in a different channel because I have Heavy Metal Philosopher reserved if I ever find the time. And I was thinking I would get him to record some intro tracks and outro tracks and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool. But a lot of what I've had to learn to do is to get other people who are better at stuff and can do a better job to help me out with it, So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Scene says, my philosophy teacher assigns your videos. That's nice. I'm glad that people do that, because it can be quite helpful for their students. And why reinvent the wheel? Like I said, when I'm teaching stuff about Chinese philosophy, I use other people's videos because they're more competent in talking about it with me. So, all right. It looks like it skipped a little bit. CMG says, how many hours a day of philosophy study and reflection would you recommend per day? 10 to 18 hours. That's not really manageable for most of us. I try to do some reading in the morning, and I'm most of the reading I'm doing at any given point is to get ready for what I'm teaching or shooting videos on. So, if you actually have the capacity to engage in reflection for 10 hours a day, that's a full-time job, and that would be kind of nice, but that's not available to most of us. Arvid asks about what do I think of Saxon's new album of covers. I listened to a few of them. I mean, it's definitely Saxon doing it. Raven did something similar a few years back when they had their Kickstarter project for Extermination. They had what was it called, Party Favors or something. And I like listening to covers by of stuff, especially where it's like a cool metal cover of something that wasn't originally metal. There's a long history of that. Great example is, like Judas Priest's Green Manalishi with the two-pronged crown. If you ever listened to the Fleetwood Mac, that's way different. Or even, Judas Priest's Diamonds and Rust, which has become also one of their main standards. They play almost every concert. Sometimes you can have stuff that's already heavy but is being done better. I actually like Wasp's covers of The Real Me and Locomotive Breath quite a lot. I think they're quite good. Gutter Groan says it has to get run by someone who stops people from editing it to say Duran Duran is your favorite. I actually like Duran Duran quite a lot. They're a band that I started listening to when I was a kid because they were on the radio, and I sort of like rediscovered them in the mid 90s, in part because I saw the video on MTV as I was working late night security for Come Undone. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I'll go out and get that tape. That was the day that I bought that tape, Stone Temple Pilots Core, and one other tape, and I don't remember offhand what it was. And I remember listening to them at, I had to I put them in the boombox at my at that time girlfriend's place, where I was like, hanging out and listening to them there. So Duran Duran, not bad. I actually play some of their songs, Let's see what else we got here. Somebody asked, do I ever reference Alan Watts' interpretations in my lectures on Chinese philosophy? Well, I don't have any lectures on Chinese philosophy, so it's kind of a moot point, but I probably wouldn't be mentioning Watt because I think Watt was a great guy for his time. I'm not into his sort of shtick. And he reminds me of too many hippies that I've known in my time that would spout the same sort of stuff, so I'm not really that big on that approach. But then again, I haven't looked at him for at least 10 years, so maybe I'd enjoy him. Let's see. Philosophy students this is Milhan, who don't study theology are weak in skill. It's not necessarily so. Depends on what theology they're studying, All right. Mark says history of metal covers of non-metal songs might be an interesting topic for the classic metal class. I was just thinking that that could actually be a great topic. How do you take things that are not even necessarily metal adjacent? We talk about like certain hard rock stuff being not metal, but at least being the same kind of stuff that would be in like uh, your dirtbag cousin's tape deck or something like that as you're listening to it. Like if you're going to redo Foghat or Jethro Tull or stuff like that. But then what about stuff that's really out there that you take and you make a nice cover of it? So let's see here. Sam, do you agree with Nietzsche that scientists are just theologians in lab coats? The more I study science, philosophy, and theology, the more I'm starting to fall in line with Nietzsche on this. So the idea there is articulated in the genealogy that, first you've got the priests and theologians, then you have the philosophers, then you have the scientists. This sounds very much like Auguste Comte, doesn't it, right? Theological, metaphysical, positive science. It's not an idea unique to Nietzsche. I think that a lot of people who are convinced of like, science and logic and facts and stuff like that are really basically, they have a theology that's by a different name. And, they are continuing something that they're claiming to react against, but they have a lot of the same tendencies. Sure, I'd say he's right about that. Does that apply to all scientists? Definitely not, Khalid G says, congratulations. I'm grateful to Allah for guiding me to you, and I'm grateful to you for the knowledge you share. That's very nice. Yeah. A lot of our life is kind of serendipitous. Here's kind of a silly question from Truth and Knowledge. Doctor, are you aware that Islamic scholars and philosophers translated many Greek works and facilitated its arrival to the Western world? Why wouldn't I be? I mean, that's basic knowledge that we got when we were in like World Civ, back in undergrad and in high school. So that's not anything new to me. As a matter of fact, I will say that the idea that like Aristotle was unknown to the West until the Great Translation Project, that's actually kind of bullshit, because the monks were copying Cicero and Seneca, and actually if you read Seneca's letters and you read Cicero, you'll get a lot of Aristotle right through that. And Boethius had translated some of the work. Same thing with Plato and all that. But it is true that the translation project which was, by the way, a joint project of Muslims, Christians, Jews, was quite important. Then there were also a lot of texts that were recovered after the Byzantine Empire was falling, and scholars fled, bringing Greek texts with them from that area. So we have a much more complicated picture to that, right? All right, let's see what else we can take up. Keeps jumping because so many people are writing things. Ashton asks a good question. I'm interested in learning German to be able to read 18th, 19th century philosophers in the original. Is the German from that era significantly different than the modern? Yeah, I mean, if you're reading a German newspaper today, it's certainly going to be different than reading, Nietzsche. Certainly different than reading, like if you want 18th century Lichtenberg, or going even further back, reading some of Leibniz's early essays, or late essays rather. He wrote his last three in German to try to make that into a philosophical language. Just like when you're reading Hume, his English can be quite difficult for English readers today, right? Or if you think about French. Diderot's French is not the same thing as you would get in a contemporary issue of Lear, That's kind of a commonplace. So Rhea asked, will you ever upload a saddled, Sadlerized by the Sadler video on your Sadler Stories playlist? Oh, talking about like how I used to be kind of vicious in argument. That's not a bad idea. I should probably do that. That's a good idea. Let's see. Ryan says, congratulations, Dr. Sadler. I've been watching your videos for about 6 years. what do you think the difference is between being a philosophy professor and a philosopher? So some philosophy professors are indeed philosophers and there's no like recipe or definition of the philosopher any more than there is of philosophy. But you can talk about living a philosophical life. I think if like you know, you have your thing that you do as your academic specialty and it doesn't have any impact on your existence, um, you're not very philosophical then. Although with some things it would be hard to see how it would, you know. But there's a lot of people who live very compartmentalized lives, right? So that's kind of a problem. Um, Johan, any thoughts on Scruton's Short History of Philosophy? Haven't read it. Can't imagine it's going to be particularly good. Most histories of philosophy aren't particularly good. They're from some sort of take, you know, and they're very, skewed in one way or another. You probably should read a variety of histories of philosophy, you know. College, I'd like to know what you believe the essence or the true nature of philosophy is to you. I just said I don't think there is a single essence to philosophy. There's a lot of different things in philosophy's history that we've called philosophy. I'm cool with there being a legitimate pluralism to it, you know. So yeah. Um, let's see here. Oh, X Bluebells, how is your class going teaching the good life through philosophy? So I'm not actually teaching the good life through philosophy. I'm teaching a class called Philosophy, Mindfulness, and Life, which is focused in particular on philosophies as ways of life, which of course includes the good life and happiness, but also focuses really heavily on philosophical practices, or as Ado likes to call them, spiritual exercises. So it's going okay. As usual, things never go quite how you expect them to or as well as you want them to. Students need a good bit, especially in this COVID-19 time, need a good bit of like, you know, bringing them back into the fold when they wander off. The students seem to enjoy it quite a bit. And it's, you know, so a little bit of background. One of the main places I teach doesn't have a philosophy program, and it's actually none of the places I'm teaching right now actually do have a philosophy program. Milwaukee Area Technical College, they only have 2 philosophy classes because they're a technical college, intro and ethics. Philosophy is under social science there. Carthage College did have a philosophy program until they phased out 15 of their major programs this last summer with like about 2 weeks notice to the people involved in them, and then fired all those professors, which is a real jerk move. And now I'm under just liberal arts there. But the main place I was talking about, Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, the place that I really enjoy teaching the most, it's an art school, you know, art and design school. And it's one of the best in the nation. And it's, I got brought in to like add more humanities electives in the philosophy area. The students really, really like taking philosophy classes. And I'm really happy to be able to bring that sort of stuff to them as well. So, and I'll mention too that my wife teaches for them as well, also as an adjunct, and brings in not only, you know, things having to do with philosophy, but also food studies, and they love that stuff as well too. So it's really quite cool. So the class is going pretty good, I'd say, you know. All right. Julian says, is there a tension between teaching philosophy generally and forming your own philosophical views? What are some philosophical topics you have your own settled opinions on? I don't think it has to be a tension. I mean, I guess if you're the sort of person who thinks that like you're either doing original stuff or you're like, you know, following in other people's footsteps, but I think there's a wide range in between. I don't think you can do in these days, I don't think you can do any effective original stuff without knowing a good bit of what's already been done and then like figuring out where you want to position yourself in there. I think that's, by the way, one of the big flaws with Wittgenstein. If he'd read a lot more, he would have been a way better philosopher. And people are coming to understand now, even within the analytic sphere, that he's been way, way overrated. In part because of the poverty of their own, stuff at the time. I don't see a real tension there unless somebody places it there. So, you know. All right, we're going to have to start wrapping up pretty soon because I got to do some work on some writing. Edmund asked, love your self-directed series. I was wondering who you might have lined up for the next one. Yeah, I want to get back to doing those in the summer. So definitely want to do medievals like Augustine. I did Anselm and I did early Christian stuff, but Augustine, Boethius, Thomas Aquinas. And who else do I want to? Who else would be really important to hit on? I mean, those are probably. I mean, maybe Abelard as well. Early modern, there's a lot of thinkers that I think could be quite useful to do those on. Descartes would be like a automatic. Hume would be another one. Thomas Hobbes. It could be good to do one on Spinoza because so many people love the ethics but don't understand it. Sort of like I was talking about a new Stoicism. People buy the book and they rave about it, but they don't actually like work through it and assimilate it. So there's that, and then later moderns like Hegel or Nietzsche, Wollstonecraft, the same people that I do a lot of talking on. I would like to do some other stuff in ancient philosophy as well, like Plutarch, for example, is somebody who I think really underrated, great Middle Platonist that's well worth reading. Alexander of Aphrodisias is another like Aristotelian. The commentator, he was called by the medievals. Well worth checking out. So, all right. Let's see here. Sam says, where are the 2020 versions of Nietzsche, Plato, Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer? They're out there. You just got to look for them, I mean, Schopenhauer wasn't very well known in his time, was he? Neither was Kierkegaard. Actually, even Nietzsche was. Mark says, don't know if you're aware of the lost media fad online. I was curious if there were any videos you recorded and never uploaded or got taken down for whatever reason. I did get a video taken down once, and it was my oldest daughter, engaging in. It was at the family reunion. Our family reunions are pretty big events. They've been going on since 1975. A big reunion is 200 people. A small reunion is 70, and it's often in between. And it goes on for 2.5 days. And we have a talent show on the second night, going way back to when it used to be cited at a different place. And so my eldest daughter was doing some ballet stuff, but she'd done it to, I don't know what song it was, but anyway, I used the song, and within like seconds of uploading it, YouTube smacked it down. It was removed. But that's the only time I've had a video removed. I don't think I have an awful lot of stuff that got uploaded and didn't get released. Other than a bunch of videos, actually, I do have a bunch of videos, but I'm probably going to take them out of the main channel and send them over to my MIAD, Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design channel, because I did some videos on Marjan Satrapi's graphic novel Persepolis, just to like give the students some background stuff, that would help them out understanding it. It's funny because Satrapi and I are like the same age, and one of the videos is actually about what's going on with her references to Iron Maiden, because she had like Iron Maiden posters and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun explaining that. But I don't think I have too much other stuff floating around. Most of what I've got has been put out there. Ecology says, thank you for answering my question. Congratulations. I pray for your success. Is there a way I can become your pupil or student, whether in person or not? Well, obviously in COVID times, there's no in-person anything, right? We are very careful about that. I'm not even teaching my academic classes in person. I do, it depends on what you mean by being a student. I offer tutorial services, which are one-on-one, where I work with people. I have a lot of clients. I've been doing that since the mid-20 teens. I also do online classes in my own study with Sadler Academy. Haven't done an awful lot with that lately because I've been so busy with academic work, but that's another possibility. And I'll probably be offering more seminars in the future. But I do a lot of online events, every month. This month, we're going to be trying something out with the Ribbon platform. I'm going to be talking about Marcus Aurelius and how to, approach him as a beginner. So there's lots of different avenues. I would say that, the way to find out about these things is every video that I've got, it says like, for philosophy tutorials, here's the link. Or, there's my Facebook author page. There's Reason.io, my business page that offers different things. And then there's the Study with Sadler Academy. So these are all ways that people can do it. I'm probably, going to be teaching less academic classes myself because I want to concentrate more on writing projects coming up in the fall. Dr. Beavis, are you familiar with Pierre Hadot's work? I actually released 5 videos on it earlier this year. So yes. Let's see. Truth and knowledge. How important is the philosophy of science for us to understand science? I think it's a neglected field. Yeah, probably. It's not an area of my own specialization, but I think people can certainly get into that. Here's a great one from Dawood. What do I foresee for the future of academic philosophy? I know some departments are looking to diversify the syllabi and incorporate more non-Western works. What does this mean for PhD graduates? I mean, practically speaking, nothing. Most departments right now are kind of in a holding pattern, trying to stay alive, except for the ones that are really well funded, that have lots of prestige and money. I mean, when you look at a lot of philosophy departments, it's already pretty diverse. And you're never going to have like a totally inclusive curriculum. So I think, there's a lot of possibilities for studying all sorts of interesting stuff. But you also, when you go into a philosophy department, you don't have to stick just with what they want you to read. I was saying this yesterday in response to a question in the EMA. I like to say it's a free country, meaning that, hey, it's your time, it's your brain, it's your studies. So for example, if the philosophy department is like, Alexis de Tocqueville sucks, nobody should read them, you can be like, well, I won't tell them that I'm reading him, but I'm going to read his stuff, and what are they going to do to you? Like kick you out? Unless they have something kind of like an inquisition going on, it's not like they can do an awful lot about you reading stuff that you're not supposed to read. We had all sorts of reading groups outside of the formal curriculum when I was in grad school, very often with students who were not even in the philosophy department, but in speech communications or English or history or stuff like that. So, all right. Let's see. So Ashton has a question about something I talked about before, but it's good to reiterate it. I'm graduating college next month and bummed about leaving philosophy discussion behind. Is it possible for people not in the Milwaukee area to join your Sophia chapter discussions online? Not only possible, it's actual. It happens all the time. And not only our Sophia chapter, but all the ones all over the United States. As a matter of fact, we're not really that active compared to some of the bigger, more established ones. And I would get like on Meetup or go to, the Sophia website and find the ones that are doing cool stuff. And, if they want to be jerks and be like, oh, well, you're not from Lexington or something like that, then just, pick yourself up and go to the next one. There's so many cool philosophy meetups and clubs and stuff like that out there that you could easily fill up your calendar with going to them, let's see. All right. Well, let me actually bring this to a close a little bit. I think we've kind of run through a lot of comments by talking about what I'm going to do in the channel. So obviously, core concepts, going to keep churning those out. I need more for my classes. I'm trying to fill in gaps here and there. The half-hour Hegel, we're probably going to finish it up this year, which is cool. And then I'll start thinking about what other big books I'd want to do. I've already done, by the way, and I'm going to remaster these, I've done the half-hour Hegel approach with Epictetus's Enchiridion. half an hour, commentary at a time. They're in a different channel, and I'm going to take those, remaster them to fix some of the sound as best as I can, and then re-upload them in my main channel. But I'm going to do Descartes Meditations. I don't know if I have the really great version. Yeah, there it is. This is one of my favorite finds. This is a version that has the French translation and Descartes Latin. And so I'm going to do, with Descartes Latin, French translation, English translation, probably Adam and Tannery, and it also includes the responses and objections. And so I'll probably do that work. And then I'll think about, what do I want to do next? People like the Sadler stories. I'm going to keep up with those. The caption contests seem to be quite popular, so I'll probably do more of those. And what else? I had that Sadler's Soapbox series that I started. I'm thinking about redoing that. Those are just basically rants that I do, and people can weigh in on that. What are other series that actually, let me put this as a question. What are other things that I've done that people want to see more of? And the reason I may have not done a lot of it could be like I just haven't had the time lately. So some people say they like the rants. That's nice. Now here's a question interesting. While I wait for people to say what they'd like to see in there. Does anyone have a mega playlist of every Sadler vid made on YouTube? So YouTube lets you make playlists that can be quite long, but playlists become incredibly cumbersome once they get past 200 videos. So, I like the core concept playlist. You notice I broke it up into sections because it's too hard on the back end to manage stuff, once things get beyond about 200 videos. So, Milahan says start debates. Not interested in debates. There's plenty of people to do that. Debates are rarely productive. A podcast. There's already a podcast called Sadler's Lectures. It's easy enough to find. It's available on pretty much every podcast thing. Toby says, I'd like to see you engage with the weird fiction side of sci-fi. I already did China Melville in the Worlds of Speculative Fiction series. Oh, here's a good one. Dawood, your Clubhouse discussion on Stoicism was great. Love to see you more on Clubhouse. I will be going more on Clubhouse and doing so with my wife, Andy Shaka. Both of us are on Clubhouse, and we're going to start doing that in May, so that's a good one. Let's see here. People are saying, we want a video about Islamic philosophy. I already told you that. I'm probably not going to do that. People can why don't, this is the sort of thing where you want to find other people who are doing it. I don't have to do everything, right? I try to stick to what I'm good at. Spinoza I'll probably do as well. OnlyFans account, that won't be happening anytime soon. I don't know that anybody would actually want that. Podcast with fans. Okay, that's kind of an interesting idea. Once I reach a sufficient level of Patreon support, I will do more with the podcast, I think. More Dr. Sadler's philosophical developments. Okay, I haven't done any of those for a while. Mark asks, have you considered doing interviews where you interview? I used to do, they're called The Ideas That Matter. There's a whole playlist of that where I'd sit down with people. And I've realized, since COVID has happened, we're going to have to go to like doing Zoom interviews. And I'm going to just start doing those probably this summer with some of my friends and colleagues, and then I'll expand it out. So, yeah. Interviews with fans, I'm not sure how that would actually happen, but that's an interesting idea. I'll have to kick that around. People are saying Leibniz, Spinoza. Yeah, those are things I certainly could do. Now, panels with fans, I don't know how that happens either. Certainly on YouTube is kind of tough to do. Truth and Knowledge, The Orientalist in You is coming out. Well, it's nice of you to channel Said. Very sad a philosopher will not talk about Islamic philosophers, very biased. Sucks for you, I guess, then, So you might want to reconsider whether you want to try to spar with me about that on here in a celebration video, but that's life. Milahan says, have call-ins with fans. Yeah, again, I have to think about how that would actually happen. That's not a bad idea, though. That would be kind of interesting. All right, so I'm going to put out some polls in the coming week or so about some of these things, like the Sadler soapbox and things like that, to try to get people's feedback, and so that could be quite interesting. And yeah, I think that's probably a good place to close things off. So I meant for this to go for about an hour. It went for an hour and a half. I have to get cracking on some work on this Anselm paper that I haven't been doing. So the conference, by the way, I'll put in a pitch for this. So if you're interested in Anselm of Canterbury, St. Anselm's College is having the 7th St. Anselm Conference. The first one started in 2000. They've been having them every 2 or 3 years since then. There's a lot of great papers. It's all online. You can register for it for $10, and it lasts 2 days. I'm going to be giving a paper. My good friend and colleague Harold Kavli is going to be giving a paper. There's quite a few other people, like big names, Bern Goebel, Thomas Williams, Maria Kolisch will be giving papers that I'm really looking forward to. So that could be it could be of interest to people. I will be actually recording my talk that I give for that, although I might just record it separately from the Zoom session, because I can't be guaranteed we're going to get a really good Zoom thing. And yeah, let's go from there. Thanks to everybody who came and joined in the celebration. And I'll see, we've got more online events coming up this month, and hopefully I'll see some of you at those. Have a great evening for those of you in the time zones much further east. Some of you might be the middle of the morning, and a good afternoon for everybody else.